should go ahead and get started. Yeah, it's Pam Curtis. I am the chair of the Early Learning Council, and this is a joint committee between the Early Learning Council and the Oregon Education Investment Board. We have a couple of members from each, as well as a staff person from each participating call today in this particular committee. And our charge is to make a recommendation to the Early Learning Council and the OEIC about the Kindergarten Partnership and Innovation Grant Fund, which was established in statute this last legislative session and put under the auspices of the Early Learning Council. And
so is this the whole council?
Given the work that we're about to do together, we thought the Early Learning Council thought it would.
Missing who?
Marlene. We think she might have had her baby. She's
Yay.
very pregnant, and she's usually not late to
Good.
things.
So,
Okay.
folks from the Early Learning
Okay.
Council and the OEIB, we're going to introduce ourselves.
Is there a way to get this up a little higher?
But while we do that, I want to just introduce the purpose statement of the fund. And there was the material that was sent out to you on either Monday or Friday by Whitney, which provided some background on the statute that was passed. So, again, the purpose statement for our committee is to come up with a recommendation today that can be brought forward to the joint conversation we're having on November 12th between the OEIB and the Early Learning Council, and regarding the Kindergarten Partnership and Innovation Fund. And the purpose of the fund itself is to be a fund for community and school partnership and innovation with a specific result in measurable increase in readiness for kindergarten. So it's intended to be an opportunity for communities, and in particular the early learning community, to come together with the K-12 or K-3 community to jointly prepare kids for kindergarten. So let me pause and we'll do introduction of the joint subcommittee members, and then we'll get on with our charge because we just have an hour on the phone today. So let me start with the OEIB folks who are on the line. Mark and Hannah, would you introduce yourself, please? I know we have a number of folks joining from the public who are on the line with us.
I'm Hannah Vandering. I'm an elementary physical education teacher from Beaverton, and I serve on the Oregon Education Investment Board.
I'm Mark Mulvihill. I'm the superintendent of Intermountain ESD and serve on the Education Board.
Thank you. Marlene, have you had a chance to join us?
Yes, hi. This is Marlene Yaskan. I'm on the Early Learning Council.
We were thinking you might not be joining us today. We were probably hoping that you might not be joining us today.
Yeah, so was I. Unfortunately, I'm here.
Well, Jada and I were in meetings all day on Monday with Kate, and she said, no sign of this baby coming anytime soon, and then she went home and delivered that night. So you just need to be in a meeting with me and Jada.
I know, yeah. Well, hopefully this will work.
I hope that, yeah, exactly.
Pam?
All right, well, thank you. Yes?
Sorry, our Chief Education Officer has joined us, so I'll let her introduce herself.
So I'm Nancy Golden, the Chief Education Officer.
Great, thank you. Jada, will you introduce yourself too, and we'll have Megan and Whitney do the same, and then I'll introduce myself and we'll get going.
Good morning, everybody. This is Jada Rupley. I'm the Early Learning System Director.
This is Megan Irwin. I am early learning staff to this committee. Whitney Grubbs, Chief of Staff for the OEIB and staff for this committee.
And good morning, everybody. It's Pam Curtis. I chair the Early Learning Council, and in my day job, I am the director of evidence-based policy, which is based at OHSU.
It's okay.
All right.
No.
So, again, the charge of the subcommittee is to make a recommendation to the OEIB and the Early Learning Council on November 12th. Related to criteria for the letting of the Kindergarten Partnership and Innovation Fund. So members of the subcommittee, I want to refer you to the material that was sent out by Whitney last week.
Great job, Whitney.
And the purpose of the fund is a partnership between community,
It's a team.
community, particularly the early learning community and the K-12 or K-3 community, for the purpose of measurable increases in readiness for kindergarten by the children in that community. The The fund was established in legislation in House Bill 2013, for which we will also have a signing ceremony at the November 12th meeting when we are together. And the legislation set up some specific criteria for the fund, and that legislation, or those criteria are in statute. For the benefit of the folks who are on the phone from the public, I want to review what those criteria are. And then the legislation also allows the Early Learning Council to establish additional criteria for the fund. And there has been some very preliminary conversation at the Early Learning Council level, and then also at the subcommittee that was putting together the Early Learning Hubs, which we are in a competitive process for right now. We won't be talking about that because of that competitive process. But in the context of setting up the process to establish the hub, there was some conversation about some possibility for this fund, and so we've noted those criteria as well. So the legislation established several criteria, and let me just outline those briefly. I won't go into great depth, but just for the benefit of the public who are on the line with us. So the following criteria are legislatively established. First, that the fund go to partnerships that are at least one early learning provider or child care provider and or elementary school. Second, that the partnerships between community-based early learning providers, the BB partnerships with community-based providers of early learning services, and that they provide early learning strategies, which include but are not limited to preschool. That the fund be used to establish ambitious but meaningful targets for kindergarten readiness. Again, this notion that it results in measurable kindergarten readiness, and that those be ambitious targets. Fourth, that the fund be used to invest in students who meet the criteria that are established by the council in rule, and what that references is that in its rulemaking process, because of the same statute, a different section, the council is obligated to focus on high risk or higher risk students. That the fund align and supplement with federal programs that provide money. In other words, there are a number of federally funded early learning programs that funds flow through the Early Learning Council, and these funds must align or supplement but not supplant those funds. That the recipients of these funds agree to report to and partner with any early learning hub that is established in their area. And again, we are just in the process of establishing those at this time. The council will make that decision as well on November 12th, so that's a big day.
I do know.
And then the legislature also provided kind of a priority section, and the priorities are to be given to assist children in becoming ready for kindergarten. We already talked about that. And then also shared development, professional development strategies among early learning professionals and kindergarten teachers. So those are the statutory criteria. Let me pause and see, members of the subcommittee, are there any questions or comments about those criteria so far? Okay, hearing none, then let me also very briefly outline the kinds of additional criteria that have had some level of discussion at the Early Learning Council level, or at the level of the subcommittee, which has been the funding subcommittee for the hubs. So some of these are redundant in your packet with what's in the statute. The first one is an example of that the applicant has a connection to the Early Learning Hub. That's a given. It's already in statute. Another criteria potentially that has been talked about by the council is that applicants have a significant history in their community of working collaboratively across sectors. In other words, they're able to demonstrate the ability to partner across community and education sectors. That whatever it is that we're funding results in a demonstrable connection between early learning and schools in that community, that we believe in whatever wisdom we have in giving out these funds, that the program or the plan that we're funding is significantly likely to improve readiness. We have a belief or some proof of that, some demonstration of that. To that point, applicants should have a proven track record and ability to achieve developmental outcomes for children, that they're also able to demonstrate a clear commitment to equity. Both the OEIB and the Early Learning Council have adopted the equity lens, that the plan reach metrics that were not necessarily included in the HUB RFA. For example, examples of that might be that they're targeted to meet the most difficult populations, or that they would result in increasing of grading or blending of funds, that successful applicants would be able to demonstrate a commitment to contributing to statewide learning around best practices related to the lessons that they learned in this partnership. And then lastly, the Early Learning Council has talked about the importance of commitment to family engagement and to three-way partnerships that would be not just the early learning formal providers in the community and the school, but that would include parents and families as well. So I will stop. We did that. I did that for the benefit of the public folks who are on the line today, but those are either the statutory criteria and or the criteria the Early Learning Council have been discussing. Let's stop and see, subcommittee members, what reactions or thoughts, or what do you like, what do you not like? Are these sufficient? Should we be adding additional considerations for the mix?
This is Marlene. I guess I'll start. I like all of the criteria. The only one that I was having some difficulty with was the in the potential criteria group, where the applicant has a significant community history working collaboratively across sectors, because I think that makes it difficult for newer entities coming up who are addressing the governor's message of collaboration and just getting started, but and have a good opportunity to be effective. So I would like to take that one out.
Okay. Any, Mark or Hannah, do you have any objection to taking that one out? I don't have any objection.
No.
Okay, so we're going to remove that. And I think that's consistent with some of the conversation that happened in the legislature about this, which was that, it may, and we're going to end up in that circumstance. We're just now establishing hubs. Statutorily, we're not able to establish hubs in every jurisdiction in the state the first year, and this fund will be released in that same time period. So we're going to have the circumstance where somebody is going to apply where there isn't a hub, and I think the hope is that perhaps that even creates the opportunity in whatever community that might be, where there's not a hub, to stimulate some partnerships that really could lead or form the foundation of something that could build into something larger for the hub. So,
What would you phase that in? I mean, that some folks are going to be awarded this first go around, and some folks the second go around. Maybe you could kind of flavor it along those lines. What I mean by that is, I do think we should encourage as much participation as possible, but maybe there's a funding source for those in a hub in year one, a funding source for those in year two, or not in the hub.
So Mark, it's Pam. I'm not sure I know what you mean. Can you say more about that?
Well, I'm just thinking again, that once the hubs are announced, you're going to have some folks who are, ready to move, and the ones who are announced are going to move on these sorts of things. The ones who are not are probably in a little bit of limbo, and I'm just wondering if this can't be a part of I don't know, maybe being strategic for those not identified in the first year. I don't know. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, so for sure we want to be able to say that we don't want to, these are not limited to communities that have a hub. And I almost hear you suggesting that there be a set-aside or a priority, I'm not sure what, that might be for communities that are not successful in their hub application. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, just to consider as we further the conversation, by the end of the conversation, it may not be a good idea, but to just put it out there for people to consider right now. I just don't want us to lose any momentum in the state that's being created by people who don't get recognized for being a hub this first time around. That's just my point.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. For sure there will be disappointment because we just aren't able to award as many hubs as applicants. So for sure there will be disappointment. Hannah or Merlin, do you have any thoughts about that suggestion?
Yeah, honestly.
No, actually, I think if I'm understanding it correctly, this is Marlene. I think I would support something like that where we're not limiting it just to hubs. We actually have a situation here in Southern Oregon where this area did not apply to be a hub. However, we have an elementary school principal in our district who is trying to bring about, she recognizes the achievement gap, and she's trying to have, she's doing a P3 project where she's making one of her buildings at her elementary school be a neighborhood. It's called a hub, like a neighborhood hub community center, where they will have preschool classes, and it'll be an inviting and welcoming area for services for parents as well, just to get connected to the elementary school. And to the school district. So I could see them as being an applicant for something like this. And they are also now considering, they are also working on hubs for the future as well, because they saw how connected they can get through this project.
Of a way that we can make that happen.
Okay, great.
Or you
I think that's exactly the sort of innovation that that the fund was designed to stimulate. So that sounds great.
And this is Hannah. I think, with most of the work that we're doing,
just put in there.
things are being rolled out fairly fast. People don't understand what's going on and don't know what the opportunities are out there. So if someone has missed it, I would advocate for making sure that we invest the funds where it's going to make the biggest difference for students in Oregon and really address some of the rural and racial and poverty issues around the state to make sure that every child has access. And if we're done with that, I have another area that I'd like to bring.
Yeah, so let me, Hannah, it's Pam, let me just make sure I've captured it and we're putting a fine point on it. So I think just sort of given the structure of this, I'm taking your idea and putting it into the structure, right? So the legislation has some criteria, and then they have, priority for grants. I think you're suggesting a priority to areas in need of how do I even say this? High need areas, which would include rural, racial, and poverty factors. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm hoping that we invest the money where it will make the biggest difference for students, not just in those places where they have the ability to write a grant or apply for a hub. Because I think I was sitting in a meeting yesterday with superintendents from rural districts. They don't have any time to actually fill out the paperwork to do this. They've got so much going on when a district or a group can put together a grant. They actually have some resources.
Not make this hard to fill out the application.
And kind of to add on to what Hannah is saying with that, that's kind of the point I was making, that the groups who are going to be awarded the hub are the ones who have really put a lot of time and have had the resources and vision to do it. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean there aren't a lot of needy kids in areas that don't receive a hub. And maybe this is an opportunity to do that. I mean, set aside some of the amount of money for, I guess I'm just thinking, if I'm a hub, I've got resources, okay, to start doing stuff. If I'm not a hub this first time around, it would be nice to access some other dollars to keep momentum moving.
Great. So Okay, thank you. I've got it, and I'm going to try to recap as we go along. So, Hannah, you had a second one you wanted to raise?
If we look at the other criteria, the very last bullet, the commitment to family engagement and three-way partnership, early childhood, school, parents, and family, to me, that, I don't know if these are in any order, but that's one of the most important things that we need to do is actually bring the families in a way that they can see the connection between early childhood and K-12 and make that articulation much smoother for everyone. I think we're missing a big part of the process when we don't engage the parents as much as possible.
Great. So I might suggest, Hannah, as Pam, I might suggest that if we end up with a structure that the legislature gave us here, again, with criteria and then priority for grants, that may be, given the emphasis you've placed on it, and I would tend to agree with you, that may be a priority item. Is there any disagreement with that?
I would call it criteria.
Okay, great. Other criteria we want to add, I suggest adding other criteria we want to, that are already here, other than the statutory ones that we should adjust.
Pam, this is Hannah again. As I was looking at the examples of the promising practices that we have in the Appendix A, there are some really good examples here about what's being done. And one of the things that, when I read these, I don't know who was in the mix when they created this, how long it took them to create it, how do we set the stage so that those kind of collaborative and building something from the ground up that will really make a difference happen. So as I was looking at it, like I said, I don't know what that looks like, but I would hope that we would lean on some of these best practices and ask some questions to those individuals that have implemented these to help us maybe set the criteria. What would you need to have in place? What were the bumps that you hit along the road so that as we set the criteria, maybe there are certain things that we could list there.
Okay, so let me ask a question of Whitney, and then let's come back to your point, Hannah, because the best practices information in your packet came from some work that the National Governors Association has done. And so Whitney, I'm wondering if it's possible for us to ask NGA to work with us to take a little bit of a deeper dive on some of those to flesh out the kinds of points that Hannah is making. And that when we ultimately create whatever we create, the release of these funds, that we're not just giving these suggested best practices or national best practices that NGA has forwarded to us, but we're actually providing some suggested tools or processes or what have you that communities could really dive into. Is that possible?
I think so. Yeah, I definitely think we could ask them for a deeper dive. Their research also includes links to some articles that describe in better detail sort of the process for developing some of these, so that you, as you're saying, Hannah, you can get a sense for who was involved and what how they were able to move these things, because often it's a process that takes more than, that takes years. Some of the overarching recommendations that are in your potential criteria were pulled from the examples, and I think, for example, the commitment to the three-way partnership piece is one that's represented in a lot of the examples, but I think there probably could be more technical assistance or more sort of deeper dive information that we provided as we move through this fund, for sure.
Would that help, Hannah? I mean, if we were to, for example, first we got to get the information, but then to include in whatever RFP materials get put out, not just a list of these national best practices, but some of the specifics and the process around creating them?
Yes, and the reason I bring this up again would be that, there are some really great things that are happening, and they're happening because people committed to the work that they wanted to do because they believed in it. And if you go out and try to recreate it, you don't have that same commitment. I think a lot of times things fall flat. And if we know, and I'm sorry, I had printed out the packet. Now I'm looking at it online, and I see the links. I couldn't see that in the printed version, so I had to look at that. But I just think that would be helpful. Make sure that we're going to do this, and we have to make sure that we allow these things to go through the process of forming something that'll really work. Let's not try to say, get it done now. Build something that's really going to move the dial for kids. And that takes time.
Yeah, so, okay. So I think let's work on, Megan and Whitney, let's work on doing that, and maybe in whatever release materials we come up with, in whatever process, which we'll talk about here in just a few minutes, we can sort of give a nod to what Hannah is talking about, which we understand that this takes a lot of commitment and a lot of work, and we're committed to investing in places where that genuinely is happening. And then we can provide some support materials to illustrate what that looks like or has looked like in other communities.
That sounds good, Pam. Thank you.
Okay, subcommittee members, anything else that we should call out? And if not, I want to summarize what I think we've said so far and then turn to a couple of logistical questions.
Pam, this is Marlene. I just had one quick question, I guess, for the whole group. Should we include something in here that ties the kindergarten readiness assessment to this using or acknowledging what the kindergarten readiness assessment is looking at for these for the monies that are used with these programs? Because I know that was an issue here in my community where that a lot of the early learning providers hadn't even seen the kindergarten readiness assessment, what's actually being assessed at kindergarten. And didn't, that wasn't something that they were really concerned about, although they knew about it, but it just wasn't on their radar. And I don't know if it's a big enough issue to make some sort of connection. I mean, I do see that there's an element here for establish ambitious but meaningful targets for kindergarten readiness, but there is an assessment that we're currently using. Whether that gets changed in the future or not, who knows? But shouldn't these monies have some sort of tie or some sort of connection to that assessment?
Yes, we can certainly add that if there's no objection. All right, so we will do that. Other subcommittee members, other adjustments we want to make to what's been suggested or what is required? Going once, going twice. All right. Well, Mark, right in on the last 12 funds there. Go ahead.
Raising my card out in the hinterlands, I didn't want to lose that sale.
Yeah, right.
Just something crossed my mind. I don't even know if it's that relevant, but I do think we need to continue to emphasize the integration of the Common Core. I don't know if that's too nitpicky or not, but this concept that we are in a P20 system of alignment, we've got to have Common Core work being done in the pre-K to some degree. And I think that ought to be included in that. It's part of the K-12 waiver. It's part of how we're doing business. We're trying to get alignment into post-secondary. Can we call out somewhere within this?
Yeah, so So it's Pam, here's my question about that, and it just reveals my naivete about it. I mean, we're just getting started with that, right? It's on our to-do list. We haven't done it yet. How do we just put it out there and say when it comes, or make a nod to the fact that it's coming and we expect grantees at some point to participate in those processes and exercises, or how do you think we do that, Mark?
I think the second thing you just said, just an understanding that as it rolls, we word it in some ways that as it rolls out, we would expect the grantees to be participating in the process to align the Common Core. And establish consistent standards. I think one of our biggest problems in pre-K is even though we have the KRA, we're still living in the world with Head Start standards and ECSE standards and other entities, and I think the more we can move toward the Common Core aligned to the KRA, the better off we are. Let's just start stating it.
All right.
When does Common
So, Mark,
Core start
this-
at kindergarten?
Which standards are you looking at to put in pre-K? Are you just talking about
That's just a
acknowledging
really
the
big
fact
can
that
of
there are
worms that I don't think
standards?
What'd you say?
That's a really, the early education standards are a huge can of worms that I'm not sure this fund is
A little of both,
the
and
right
I guess
vehicle for
I look at
opening,
like the
although
Head
they
Start
need to be
standards that are pretty
revised.
comprehensive,
Because
and it's
we
part
don't even really have,
it's
like, we
what
have
we're
a Head Start
measuring is part of our
framework, they're
silo
not
problem.
standards.
Yeah, I think this would
Okay.
just be looking
And-
at kindergarten and
I mean,
saying,
I'm looking at like in our region
we'd
right
have
now,
to
there's
teach
three
these kind
different
of things
sets
to
of
get to the
standards right
standard.
now.
Now
Everybody's
declaring
saying,
them
yeah,
for the whole
KRA,
state
but
or
the
anything.
KRA is not yet aligned
Many of the
completely to
policy
the
and
Common Core and
practices
the other.
It is.
are around.
Maybe I'm wrong, you guys
aligning.
know this more than I do, but
By bringing
I just
teams
know that there's
of,
different
you know,
measurements and
early learning
standards
providers and
in
kindergarten
place.
teachers together and developing.
And we have got to align pre-K to Common Core and have one set of standards, not multiple set of outcome standards that are in right now. That's the whole essence of the KRA, correct?
It is, Mark, it's Pam, and to make it one step more complicated, which so I'm thinking about how we take all of this and put it into this fund. And it may just be asking people to participate in those conversations in their community. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah.
But to make it one step more complicated, I mean, you're exactly right. There are so many standards, and now I'm not going to talk K-12, I'm going to talk early learning. There's a lot of early learning standards out there, a lot. So one of the things the council is doing and the good folks at the Early Learning Division is to create a quality rating system which establishes quality standards at different levels. It's a tiered system. It's a public, transparent system that could also be used in the market because most of our childcare is market-driven here in Oregon, so that families can also see if I purchase childcare at a one-star center or a one-star family daycare home, here's what I'm going to get. And if I go to 2 stars or 3 stars or 5, here's what I get. So I think what we ultimately want to do, we're a long way from that, is to align consistent, first of all, get the standards in early learning consistent.
Because
We've got the KRA and the pivot. I'm sure we'll make adjustments as we go. But to align the rating and quality standards on the early learning side with the Common Core and the kindergarten readiness assessment, as I'm sure will be adjusted over time, becomes the pivot for how we measure both of those. It's the end point for one and the beginning point really for another.
So somehow what you just explained there, Pam, needs to be in that whoever receives this is going to have to be part of that process.
Okay.
Well, but I don't are they part of the process, or is the Early Learning Council working on looking at the standards and trying to make something that's reasonable? God, I certainly hope we let kids be kids and learn at their own rate, and not
Right.
put the pressure of this standardized test and all this down to our 4-year-olds. So I understand we want to get them ready, but boy, I don't know.
So Hannah, it's Pam. Let me just clarify. The rating system is nothing about kids, and it's all about the settings in which kids find themselves in that time, so that we assure at a very basic level that there are basic health and safety standards being met, so kids are in healthy and safe environments. And then we sort of go from there in terms of, quality learning opportunities and experiences. And I'm making this up. Well, I'm totally making it up. I can't remember exactly how it's worded, right?
That wasn't my question about the rating that you were. I'm talking about taking the Common Core and pushing them down into the early learning. I would hope that the Early Learning Council is working with providers and those who have the developmentally appropriate knowledge to be able to create what is appropriate for our incoming students to prepare to do. And that's part of the kindergarten readiness assessment. But like I said, I want kids to be prepared, but I want them to be kids, and I want them to have a little bit of fun while they're learning. So
I'm with you, Hannah. I guess I've just been through the process here where we've been working on that for a couple years.
You can have fun while you teach the standards.
Intimidating, smarter, balanced
Me.
image that you think when you say Common Core and pre-K.
You should all the way up.
So it's Pam. I have a suggestion for this, and I'm looking in my list of criteria now. I'm not seeing it, so maybe one of you can help me. But there's a criteria in our packet that really addresses this kind of notion of contributing to kind of best practices understanding. It seems to me that this is similar to what we are, the spirit of what we're trying to say. We're sort of getting caught up in this, in what is or what isn't in terms of ratings and standards and Common Core. I think the spirit of what we're trying to say is that we want to learn from these innovative community, family, school connections, and that ought to inform our work related to the development of standards, both on the early learning side and the K-12 side. And so I'm wondering if that's the place to put it, and I'm not finding it in my things, but I will, that in that criteria related to contributing to state best practices, we could add a little piece about including participation in conversations related to, quality environment, or, quality and aligning standards or something like that.
It's Pam. It's the second to the last suggested or potential criteria.
Thank you. Subcommittee members, what do you think about that idea?
This is Marlene. I support that. My understanding, though, was that the kindergarten readiness assessment did take into consideration the Common Core. But I mean, we could totally find out with Rob by asking Rob Saxon, I guess, if they did, if it did in fact do that. But that was my understanding. So I don't. I don't know if we just need to clarify it for the applicant that's been taken into consideration in the kindergarten readiness assessment, just throwing out the Common Core, just so people are familiar. They're seeing it over and over again, even in the piece, early years. But I'm happy with what you suggested as well.
Mark and Hannah, what do you think?
Can you say one more time which bullet you're referring to?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't very articulate because I couldn't find the darn bullet, and now Whitney helped me find it. So it's the second to the last one. It currently reads, applicant demonstrates commitment to contributing to statewide learning around best practices. We could easily add a piece there about common standards or common quality metrics or whatever the right phraseology is. My suggestion is we either do that or we leave it live for now, knowing that it's work that's coming up in the future, and we're just not quite ready to articulate what that is at this point. So those would be my suggestions.
This is Julie Buck. I haven't talked yet. Can you hear me?
Julie,
Yeah. The committee.
this is actually, this is not a, we don't have public testimony and input on this agenda. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. You said community, so I didn't know what.
Yeah, I apologize. So this is, we will be able to take that at the the OEIB and the Early Learning Council meeting, which is coming up on November 12th. So this is a working subcommittee, and the public input will be taken at that point. I apologize.
Okay, that's okay.
So council members, subcommittee members, thoughts about, my suggestion is we either add a phrase or we just leave it alone at this point.
I'd leave it live.
I'd add a
The
phrase.
section?
I'd add a phrase because I think our whole idea here is to pull together, eliminate silos, have people work together toward a common kindergarten readiness assessment so that more kids are ready for kindergarten. We've been loose in the past. We'll get the same results in the loose. I think we need to move in a direction that it's going to be tightened up what the expectations are for ready for kindergarten. I'll leave it at that.
I don't see the harm in adding it. I agree that it would just, it would help tie the two together.
Okay.
And I don't think the Common Core goes below kindergarten as I read it, but.
So
No, I agree. I don't think it does, Arlene. But I think what we did when we were doing the kindergarten readiness assessment was taking into consideration what is going to be expected at first grade, second grade, third grade, and so on. And so I think the kindergarten readiness assessment takes into consideration what's going to be expected or coming up with the Common Core.
I didn't feel like he was performing
So
to
in
standard.
Cam, I have a suggested phrase,
Sorry,
and we'll see how
He
this
was like-
goes.
Exactly
But
what
I think
Pam
the
said.
spirit, if we could just get out of our minds for a second, the words "the Common Core," because that means something very specific at this point in time. I think the spirit of what we're saying here is that there's clearly work going on in K-12, called the Common Core, but there's clearly work going on there around, aligning expectations and standards. Those might not be the right words. We are doing the same thing on the early learning side, trying to align standards and expectations so that there's at least a base level of assurance of quality in those environments. And ultimately, the two have to meet. This is about, if the early learning is all about helping kids be developmentally as fully ready as possible, and I don't just mean cognitively, I mean things like self-regulation and relationships and those kinds of things, then there's a meet at kindergarten. And ultimately, what we want to be able to do is align our understanding and our lessons about what and expectations about what early learning ought to deliver for kindergarten, for example. So if we added a phrase to that second bullet, so we put a comma after best practices, for those of you that are looking at it, we put a comma after best practices and then say including work related to aligning standards and expectations across early learning in K-3. Can you live with that, Hannah?
Yep.
Okay. Mark and Marlene, can you live with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, all right. Okay, I'm going to move us along. I do want to summarize what I think we've said so far, just because we're all in different locations, and I think Whitney and Megan are going to be making these changes for us, so I want to make sure that I've got the same record that they do. So relative to the criteria, we have criteria from the legislature and other suggested criteria. So from the list for which we were working, we want to remove the second bullet under the potential criteria, which has to do with a significant history of collaboration. We want to add some language that clarifies that these grants are not limited to communities that have hubs. We want to add an understanding that the kindergarten readiness assessment is the metric in Oregon and how we're measuring what the legislature is asking us to do, which is that significant momentum or significant change in readiness as a result of these grants. We want to add a phrase at the end of the second to the last bullet that talks about best practice contribution, including conversations or work related to aligning standards across early learning in K-3. And then the legislature has given us some priorities for grants. We suggest adding 2 to their list. One is a priority around communities that would make kind of the biggest difference here, which we're defining as priority to rural communities and those communities with high concentrations of children in poverty or children of color. might not be exactly the right words, but something close to that. And then we also want to add a priority given to family engagement, parent and family engagement. So those applicants have a genuine parent and family engagement aspect to what they're doing. Lastly, we want to make sure that in the RFP materials, we're not only just referencing those national best practices, but we're diving that deeper level to articulate what processes and tools those communities went through and might be available to applicants for this process. Did I miss anything? All right. So Whitney, did that, and Megan, did that jive with your notes?
Yes.
That did, yes. Excellent.
Okay. So I think in the 10 minutes that we have left, there are a couple of questions that we need to grapple with. One is eligible applicants. So there's some statutory guidance related to this. Those include that eligible applicants would include school districts, ESCs, nonprofits, secondary education institutions, early learning hubs. Are there other sort of eligibility parameters we want to suggest to this in terms of either eligible applicants or minimum number of kids served or anything else? I bet it is. Sorry. Okay, going once, going twice. All right, so I hear us saying we'll stick with those eligibility pieces that's already put forward. The second question is really around sort of nature of the funds. The fund, as it, correct me if I'm wrong, Jada, I think it's about $4 million in total. Is that right? Or Megan or Whitney?
You are correct. You are correct.
Okay. So there are questions about whether we put parameters around the size of grants, whether we put parameters around, that's the biennial allocation. We have no guarantee that the funds will go beyond the end of the biennium. We need to spend the resources in the biennium. Is it do they get, I'm making this up now, do they get the opportunity for a grant in both years of the biennium? Is this a biennial allocation in terms of, and we're sort of halfway through the first year of the biennium by the time this goes out the door for sure. So what are your thoughts about any parameters around size of grant or that
She
sort
on
of
these
thing?
questions now.
How we address sustainability is going to go away, maybe, or maybe not, at the end of the biennium. Do you have any thoughts about that, subcommittee members?
Well, that's open-ended.
I know.
Who do we anticipate will be the folks, tell me the teams you would anticipate applying for this?
Actually, Mark, it's Pam. I don't know. The types of folks, the types of organizations who might be the applicant, I think are those that were listed as eligible in the legislation. I could anticipate we might get a district or an ESD or a nonprofit, but clearly it has to statutorily be at least a school and the community, and we're a community partner, at least one of each, and we are saying the additional criteria, family engagement. So those are that to me, that's the floor that we've set. As of this call, presuming the ELC and the OEIB agree. So that's the entree.
Did you have any, Jada, did you have any minimum capacity requirements with the hub in your mind?
No, we did not have any minimum. We opened it up to everyone who applied. Looking at that, Mark?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Yeah, because I'm just trying to get in my head,
Number of students.
you need to have enough money to do something with it, but
We wanted to get to.
there are times a certain amount of money it's nice to have, but it's not enough to do anything with.
Up to that.
I guess I would,
And you
you know,
get more
just as
money,
open-ended as
the
a
more
question,
kids
just
you
to
serve.
start the
So
conversation
and
is, I think the larger the grant and the fewer the folks, you get more bang for your buck. And if
The
we're,
fewer the number of recipients?
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
and especially if we're kind of, you know, looking at an eye that these, you know, these might be folks that, you know, didn't get the hub. You know, that's just the more you should, that's just Mark's view for whatever it's worth. I know it doesn't mean it's always right, but if you shotgun the money out, you got a lot less capacity to really do anything because you need to sustain people. I mean, I would imagine the grant folks are going to want people and coordinators that they can sustain.
So, Mark, it's Pam, that was going to be my question, regardless of what our answer is on this. The one thing I feel strongly about is that we don't set people up to drive off the cliff at the end of the biennium.
Yeah.
Right? So all we know is we have $4 million this biennium. We don't know if we're going to have $4 million or $2 million or $10 million or none next biennium. So that's a huge challenge for us and for recipients to not set up an expectation that there's ongoing funds and to fund projects that can be done and lead to something in the next, what'll really amount to 18 months.
I'm just wondering if we can be creative with transitioning to all-day kindergarten. I mean, because when you think about when it expires, this money, that's when funding will, hopefully, by law, be there for all-day kindergarten. Maybe this is a transition to some programs, I don't know.
Marlene and Hannah, what are your thoughts about this question related to size of grant and ongoing, or not ongoing, but multiple year or one time in the biennium? Do you have any thoughts about those items?
This is Marlene. I think it should be for both years of the biennium. But it kind of, I was a little hesitant to make it. I saw the suggested criteria from for grants ranging from $200,000 to $1 million, so the $1 million grant, I was hesitant to award something that large, just because then it just limits how many people or how many organizations will have using these funds. However, I could see a school district using these funds for a pre-K program of some sort, and they would have and they would have much more access to getting more students and serving more of the population. So therefore, I could see $1 million being used in these things. So I don't know. I agree. I think we shouldn't have a limit on the funding and just see what projects. I think if that's what was being said, that we should just see what projects are out there. But I would give it for 2 years as a biennium.
Yeah, and without seeing what's out there and what people are going to turn in and the timeline that we have for them, I don't know what that looks like. And again, the biggest bang for the buck to be able to help as many students across the state. And I think one of the things that we had heard through the forums is make sure that we don't spend all our money down the I-5 corridor, that we're reaching out across the state to hit all areas. Great. But I don't even know if they'll be able to turn in grants, so we'll see. I think it'll be exciting to see what gets turned in.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So it sounds like what we're saying is that we're in agreement that whatever the grants are, they are for an allocation for the biennium, not for each year in the biennium, and that we aren't going to set any minimum or maximum grant parameters. Okay, last question in the last couple of minutes that we have here. There's one more question in your packet, committee members, about limitations to the funds. So, not used for capital expenses. Are there other limitations that the group thinks ought to be considered at this point?
Are you going to put anything about Supplanting, I mean,
No, we probably should call that out. I'm going to rely on Whitney to help us do that. We should, that was the intent of the coordination or whatever that language was in the statute related to federal funds. So we can call that out specifically as the limitation, no supplantation.
yeah, if you can even use that word, because the folks in my world, here's an opportunity that I can pay somewhere, it's going to cut, and they understand supplant.
Okay. Okay, so the limitations, more explicit on the supplantation issue and capital expenses. Are there other limitations that the committee would like to forward at this time?
I'm assuming we're okay with materials, consumables.
Yeah, I'm with you. Anna, okay with you?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think about how to really get that commitment to everyone having collaborative everything to happen, but I don't know how you word that, get that in there. I think we're just going to have to look when they're reviewed if they meet the criteria.
Yeah, and I think, as the Early Learning Council goes through this process, and Marlene, I'll rely on you and the staff who are on the phone to help me remember this, but I think, to your point, Hannah, we probably need to figure out the review process that best enables us, and maybe we say that explicitly as we recommend this to the ELC and the OEIB, not in the criteria for the grantees, but a review process that enables us to really gauge that level of commitment that you've talked about so well on this call, Hannah.
Well, a way to do that, that I've seen in other types of grants is, in their introduction of who they are and their current budget for the initiative and why they need the additional funding. That's a way to kind of get at where Hannah's coming from, to demonstrate that this is a collaborative process, hopefully with multiple raised funding streams.
All right, we have come to the end of our time. Let me try to summarize, not the criteria, I did that, but the other points we've made, and then I have one last logistical question as folks are getting ready to go. So we've said no minimum, no maximum, both years of the biennium is the allocation. In terms of limitations, we have no capital expenses or supplantation, and we are encouraging a review process that enables us a gauge of genuine collaborative commitment from multiple partners. Have I missed anything? No. Okay. So in terms of next steps, Whitney and Megan are going to get this all put together in the right language for us. Then we're going to ask the National Governors Association for a deeper dive on those best practice that were in the memo that prepared for us and in your packet, and thanks to Whitney for initiating that.
Maybe just
and
an
then
example of
we
a few
have
projects or
recommendations
something.
to make to a joint meeting of the OEIB and the Early Learning Council on November 12th. I'm going to guess that Marlene's not going to be at that meeting. Yes, I hope you're right. Gosh, I hope so, yeah. What's your actual due date, Marlene?
It was the 28th, so.
Oh my gosh, okay. Well, Kate had the baby on the 28th, and hers was Halloween. Maybe you'll have hers. Maybe
I know, yeah, still counting, still hopeful.
Okay. So Marlene will be there. Hannah and Mark, would one of you like to present this to the joint meeting?
I'm sorry, one question that was me.
Yeah, no worries. We have a joint meeting of the OEIB and the ELC on November 12th, at which we will present our recommendations. I'm looking to see if one of you would like to present.
I'm good, Hannah, if you want to do it.
Oops, I'm sorry. Hannah, what did you say?
Yeah, I'm happy to assist in that. It'll be, that's at the 1 o'clock meeting.
I think that's right. Is that right? I don't have mine in front of me, but I think that's right.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, great. Mark,
From 1 to 2.
Okay, thank you. Mark, what did you say?
I'd be glad to help support it. It'd be great if Hannah took the lead.
Okay, great. So Hannah, are you comfortable taking the lead?
Sure.
Okay, so Mark and I will be there to support you. Marlene won't be there because hopefully she'll be in baby land. So we'll work on whatever presentation materials we need to, and then we'll be in touch.
Okay.
All right, thanks to all of the subcommittee members for being on the line today, to staff for all of the advanced work, and also to members of the public who were able and willing to hang in as we talked through this. Even though you weren't allowed to talk, I apologize. So there will be public input taken at the Early Learning Council meeting on the 12th about this. So if you're one of those who's inclined to do that, please do so at that time. All right, anything else for the good of the order?
Good job, great preparation.
Thank you very much.
Nope. Yep. Thanks, everybody. Good luck, Marlene.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.